We are ready.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 14, 2024 meeting of the Health and Human Services Committee. My name is LV Barosa and I'm the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Burke. This meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. As a reminder, the New York State law requires all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you may have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you may have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. We need a volunteer to take minutes tonight.
I can do it.
Thank you, Miriam. Good evening, Martin. So Miriam will take the minutes. Thank you so much. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name. If your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Marty Barrett.
Present.
Elby Barosa.
Present.
Brock Friedman.
Present.
Sandra Leptoff.
Present.
Raj Nayar.
Present.
Kevin O'Keefe. See him here. Marion Roth.
Present.
And Jerry Weinstein.
Present.
We have a quorum.
And Kevin O'Keefe is present.
Yep, I'll count you as present.
Thanks. I had a family emergency. I apologize. I'm not there.
Yep, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the February 8th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the February 8th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you as so you can speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about the committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on a record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Tonight's agenda is about the discussion on the city's response to unhoused individuals with mental health issues. So Brendan had a few information for us. Brendan, can you open those?
Yeah, sure, yeah, it was actually several articles I shared, just to give some background on, the mayor's plan with regard to unhoused individuals experiencing mental health issues. Also with regards to, like some of the concerns that some people have around the plan, as well as, other concerns related to, unhoused individuals struggling with mental health. So, there are lots of articles out there about this broad issue. But those were a few that further clarified things for me and might clarify things for you all as well. As it is a very complex issue. An issue that our office gets service requests about as well. I don't know if there are any particular articles of the bunch that you all would like me to highlight to start with.
The big issue is that there's always available beds, but the bodies aren't in the bed, I mean, in the shelter system. Like, I think they're up to, the state had New York, 1, 2, 3, 4, and each time it was 400 beds or so. And they don't allow people going from hospitals to those beds. They have to go from some sort of permanent or shelter or something to be eligible for those beds. So people who they pick up in the street, then go to the hospital, have their 72 hours or whatever, and are given medication, and then they're back out in the street, and the management team may or may not be able to find them to make sure that they stay on their bed, on their meds. I remember, you can't imprison these people.
And if they do not agree, we cannot force them.
Supposedly with the mayor's plan, that they're able to be more, subjective. Police and the rescue teams are supposed to be more subjective in being able to pick people up, involuntarily. That was,
Yeah.
in the things that Brendan had sent, but
It says, and they're making the law explicit that a person requires care when their mental illness. What is that? Prevents them from meeting their own basic needs.
and then on the other hand, you'll have agencies or, not-for-profits who say, well, you can't take them off the street without them saying so, and there'll be lawsuits, and everybody's
Yeah.
gonna be in court.
So how can the community board? I mean,
Well,
how can we help?
back under the de Blasio era, so there was Thrive NYC. It was intended to be like kind of a coalition of mental health experts, advocates for, homelessness, as well as police, who are gonna canvass areas, and if they saw someone who had, shown signs or have been reported to, they were going to talk to those individuals and with the mental health experts and such, pick them up and bring them to the whatever facility or agency that they need. The problem with Thrive NYC was that, back when I was on housing and homelessness, we tried to get someone from there to speak to the community board, and they never responded to us, and then when we tried to get statistics, they never provided it to us. But then in the news, they would always say it was a successful program. So it was a little bit sort of like, we didn't know much about it, and I'm throwing out names. I remember Claude mentioned how he was reaching out to them time and again, and the deputy who was in charge of Thrive would just not answer anything. And so I don't know if Thrive is still being utilized by this administration or some form, but if there is somebody who is there, maybe we can reach out to them and have them, maybe they'll be a little bit more open. It was a little evasive with de Blasio's
I
administration.
haven't heard.
Yeah, but I don't even know if
Oh,
Thrive's
sure.
existing
Yeah.
anymore, because I think Mayor Adams now has his own plan, which is a little bit more forceful than just having teams canvas and talk. And to be honest with you, I don't believe even that was working, because under Thrive, we didn't have any statistics. So we just only took the mayor's word that they were reaching out and able to talk to people and such. But if you went to any of the, major spots like Grand Central or Penn Station, you didn't see those type of teams. Most of the teams you saw were breaking ground just on their own, going and talking to people. Or Grand Central Coalition, the one that's involved with Main Chance, they would just be reaching out to people on their own and unsupervised just themselves. So again, I think that it's all about implementation. I think recently in the news, maybe about 6 months ago, there was a talk about Kenver's law, how it wasn't being enforced. And, with the high rate of mental illness now, on the street, because of the lack of social services, they were looking at that as like, perhaps now they have to actually enforce it. It's in the books, but it's just not being enforced. And, again, we have individuals who probably just need their medication and stuff, and when they don't take it, they act erratically, they're on
Yeah.
the subways and such like that. So it's a very layered and difficult subject, but if there's someone from the mayor's office who can speak to us, that would be great, but I'm not too sure where to start.
Yeah,
Nora?
I kind of really agree with what you said, that we need some expertise to come in, because I felt like these articles raised more questions than they answered. Who's being picked up and who's getting left behind? And then the people that are getting picked up, where exactly are they going? And as you said, are they just getting released in 2 or 3 days and they're back on the street?
Yeah.
Or exactly, or are there chronic long-term facilities that they are available to them? And so I feel like we need people, like you said, like on the inside mayor's office, or perhaps they're thinking the psychiatric department from Bellevue, who are on the front lines of this issue. Maybe they could, we could reach out to them. They could come talk to us on what their experience has been.
I think also from the Department of Health. Because Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, they don't have any, like in the health department, we have public health advisors wherein, like, for example, a TB patient, when they come out of the hospital, there's a public health advisor already assigned to them, so they can assist in when it comes to taking the medication. So they are compliant with the medication. But with mental health, we don't have public health advisor that can follow up when they come out of the hospital. They're being discharged because they're already no longer psychotic. But when they are released in the community, no one is following up when it comes to adherence to treatment.
Could you
So-
work with somebody who's more or less in charge of the psych department at Bellevue, to who in health and hospitals to talk to?
It's not Bellevue, it's the health department, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, because they're the ones that monitor who comes out of the hospital.
When my wife was still with OMH, she was monitoring the psych department, well, the family and children's psych department at Bellevue. That was one of the places that she monitored. And at that time, they were doing a great job. Again, this is a dozen years ago, but there were people in charge there who reported back and forth. That
Yeah, I just, the overall question is, how did this get to our committee? Did somebody suggest it? Is that person, because sort of in our laps and we're trying to put something together here, who is that person? What would they be as a resource? It is a very complicated issue. And so I don't even know what level we're supposed to be talking about this on, but someone must have brought it up in the first place who had some agenda. I think that would be very useful. I would talk about who's going into, who are they putting in these hospitals in the first place for 72 hours, they get out. Somebody gave him a diagnosis, didn't give him a diagnosis, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big pot that's there. I don't know what's in the, what's in the pot is questionable, but I think the first part is where this idea come from and who would be the liaison to direct us if we want to deal with this. Because otherwise we're just kind of picking out various points that and it doesn't, it would be much more helpful if we know where this comes from.
Let me listen to Jerry. Jerry.
Well, so just to piggyback from the last speaker, I presume this is an overlap with homelessness, but it's a good question. The thing that jumps out to me, and Brendan's and your materials were so helpful, was this DiNapoli statewide audit from 15 months ago, which really had high percentages of people who were not sorted. 26% of those that they audited, 3,000, had been diagnosed with serious mental illnesses that should have qualified them, and 26% were not placed in a mental health shelter. So we've got five different areas, and even the substance abuse was even worse. So I think even at that point, we're talking about discharge, which is very important, but even just finding the appropriate shelter for people seemed to be a problem. And the CBS article was actually a summary of a very long New York Times investigative piece that was 10,000 words, which I started reading. And they followed and tried to re-engineer 96 people who were in the shelter system and committed a violent crime after being discharged. And it does seem to pair up. I mean, the thing that I see, I think you went to the previous page of what was on the screen. A flag for me was that there was going to be some telehealth service for NYPD to call up a clinician. Setting aside my reservations, which are deep on that, follow up with all these things, this DiNapoli report from 15 months ago, what has happened since? Are they getting better about assessing and placing people? And if NYPD people are doing and they claim to be training them, where's the data? How many people are they picking up? I mean, the greatest worry that I have, because I had a sister with mental illness her whole life, is that you're essentially it's the equivalent of racial profiling. It's racial profiling plus, because somebody isn't behaving according to your, paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think the idea, as Elvie was saying, for having Commissioner Bassan or someone on his staff present to us or the full board would be really timely, because I have many more questions than I have answers.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues is, and it's in the news clip that Brendan shared with us, but it's also been just all over the news for the past, ever since this got proposed, is that there is no data. And so whenever they would ask questions to anyone in the mayor's office, they can't really answer all of the questions. And so I think the news clip is maybe from December or something. I can't remember.
It's from a little over a year ago.
Okay.
It was a few months after the mayor
February.
announced his plan on house individuals with mental health issues.
So data is weak, very little transparency in what's actually happening on the ground. And how is it getting recorded, if it's being recorded at all. And the other thing about Thrive, I think it's now NYC 988. So I remember it being NYC Well, during de Blasio's administration, and they've kind of like moved it under the 988 hotline that was introduced for mental health calls. I don't know how many people are calling it, but I think that's what it is now.
Okay.
And what Sandra said, I'm also curious about how this got added to the agenda.
Thank you.
I think somebody brought this topic last.
Yeah, I brought it
It
up.
was you. Doro.
Yeah, I thought it was a good topic, you know, I'm very conflicted about the issue, because I also share the concerns about civil rights. On the other hand, it's cruel to leave people on the street who can't take care of themselves. That to me is a civil right issue too. And it's a really common complaint in this district, and I thought it's worth us having a discussion. Maybe we can't come up with an answer, and maybe I don't know the right answer, but I still think it's worth a discussion for this community board.
How about if we speak to somebody who's in the middle of it? On East 33rd Street, there's an organization, Care for the Homeless, and they've been around for a long time. And we should call them up, and maybe their chief medical officer or their chief program officer could come visit with us and give us what statistics they would know, because this is the stuff that they deal with every day.
Yeah, I think
And-
that's a good
and-
idea.
They're not quite in our district, they're 55 East 33rd Street or whatever, so they're, you know, a block away. But, you know, why don't we invite them? And they would be able to tell us something.
Yeah.
And, both the positives and the negatives, you know, because they're the advocates for these people. They do provide mental health and housing and physical health and, you know.
We can, Brandon, we can put that, we can request somebody.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yes, thank you. This is a really important topic. Now I know 4 states do keep family members obligated to try to get involved in help. I'm not suggesting, I'm sure this is laden with civil liberty issues as well, but there are some interesting solutions. I think just more research on this, on what solutions have been tried and successes. But again, yes, family members, and I certainly have had family members, a couple, who have had mental health issues, and family didn't get involved. Don't know if that should be something on the state level, but it's something at least for us to examine. And the other thing is, and you probably know this, the the Youth and Education Committee is bringing up mental health. It's on the agenda for the next meeting. It doesn't involve unsheltered individuals, but it does involve the very significant increase in mental health among our young population. So maybe there's some crossover there. Those were my 2 top of mind thoughts. Thanks.
I've noticed one pattern. Is it okay if I go?
I'm not sure if it was Jerry or.
Oh,
Mike.
Jerry, go ahead.
Briefly, a dear friend and somebody I mentored is the head of Street Lives, which is citywide. So Adam could, more than present, he could just field questions left and right. He knows all this stuff. And I don't know anyone in this space that would support involuntary commitment. Just saying.
Mariam?
And there are a lot of people who don't want to stay in shelters. I've worked with domestic violence survivors who've needed a place. They've had awful experiences. I've talked to homeless people. They prefer to sleep on the streets than go to shelters, or go to like a religious building or institution. So I've always been curious about why is it that shelters are so unsafe? Because that's what I keep hearing is I don't feel safe. My things get stolen. The staff don't treat the residents well. So there's definitely a huge problem with the shelter system too. So if someone is being taken to a hospital involuntarily and they're not going to a shelter afterwards, I'm assuming they're saying no to that. But that's like a whole other issue is why is the shelter system so bad for so many people? And that's not health, or I mean, I guess it kind of
Yeah,
is.
that's a different, yeah.
I mean, I think since it seems like we're touching on probably 3 committees, right? Our committee,
The
housing and homeless,
the
and youth and
housing
education, right? We perhaps maybe should all join forces and especially touch base with Rich on housing and homeless to see if there's anybody they've talked to, they have any contacts with respect to this. They might have actually even discussed this, but not necessarily focused on the mental health aspect, but still nonetheless have maybe the resources that we can then piggyback off of and utilize. The other thing about the homeless shelter issue, so, Housing and Homeless has in the past gone on tours of the various shelters, and we did the 30th Street one years ago. And one of the issues with something as large as that is that they have one room, and the facility isn't built for, sheltering, because it was a former hospital. So they use a large room and they have like maybe 5 or 6 beds in one room. And while they go through a vetting process, the vetting process really is intended to ensure that whichever individuals are coming through, don't have like a criminal background or any kind of sexual violence associated with them, but they don't necessarily screen for mental health. So a lot of times when we talk to people who are in the shelter system, their concern is that they would be sleeping next to someone who might have a mental issue. And again, there's also that there is no barriers around the beds. So that there is that sense of unsafe, even if you are under, behind a door and have a roof over your shoulder, over your head. When you're on the street, you know where you are. And to your point, there is that safety issue. Oftentimes when I've talked to folks in our neighborhood here, and they say that they feel safe in the neighborhood, which is why they sort of either gravitate towards it or stay on the street versus going into a shelter. And it's a sad state when you think that it's better to be out to the elements versus to be indoors. But understanding where they're coming from, I can certainly, I can appreciate the fact that, yeah, you're in there with strangers, whereas when you're outside, you're pretty much on your own. You have strangers around you, but you're certainly more aware of your surroundings. And at some point, people tend to go to their respective homes, so the streets get quiet. It's what they feel comfortable with. But it's a struggle because there's another BRC is a shelter provider, and they have the safe havens, which is the unstructured type shelters where they don't have as many rules and regulations as you would see in your standard one. They have somewhat of a curfew, but not really. It's intended that if you don't show up, then you don't get your bed, but people can come and go as they please. They do have programming on site, but you're not required to take it. The idea is to give people who are on the streets the ability to be off the streets, because they're the chronic homeless that they're trying to target. BRC's been fairly successful in having their smaller shelters. Again, they don't have these 100-bed ones. They have like maybe 30 beds or something to that effect. They oftentimes take up like a brownstone. And they're dotted around the city and they do a lot of work. So I would also say perhaps if we reach out to Housing and Homelessness and find out the contact they have at BRC, maybe then they can provide us with some information on the mental health aspect. If they encounter that, most likely they have.
The thing on sexual violence is a lot of it goes unreported, so you can only screen so much, right, for the people who are coming in. And then one of the stories I do remember, there was a Black trans person who was homeless in the neighborhood, and she told me that she kept getting sent to the wrong shelter. And the experiences she was having in those shelters, there was a lot of sexual abuse that she was dealing with, and so that is something that should never happen. And because the very first thing I asked her, I just moved to the area, was, do you want me to call 311 or something? And she was like, absolutely not, because the cops will come and they will take me to the men's shelter. And that's devastating, so it's like safety looks different for different people. So there was a Muslim woman who said that her bag kept getting stolen. There's a Black trans person who's saying, I keep getting sent to the wrong shelter and misgendered. So there are a lot of serious issues with this.
Yeah. Granted.
Yeah, and sorry to add even more issues and complications, but to sort of answer some of the things about homeless shelter security. Obviously, this is only one layer of the issue, but the Public Safety Committee started a budget request, which I'm sharing on screen right now, Actually, with our most recent budget request cycle, related to Department of Homeless Services providing security at all of our homeless shelters in our district. The reason for that being that, the Public Safety Committee heard that, DHS police was cut from many of our shelters. And as a result, there was private security at many of these shelters. And it's resulted in some rather uneven results. You know, so, as I said, that's nowhere close to the whole issue, but I thought I'd highlight this budget request since it's at least somewhat related to what's being discussed about homeless shelters and safety and security.
Jerry and Sandra again.
Sandra?
Yeah, I'm trying to sort of figure out where we're going, but I hear one issue is diagnostics, right? People are taken off the street. I don't know to what degree they're disorderly, that they are sent transiently over to Bellevue or wherever else. So one is, how are those decisions being made about where people are shipped? So one is the diagnostic issue, and my guess is that's done between police and somebody else, but I don't know. The second is, what happens once they get to the hospital? It sounds like they're in there for max 72 hours. And then out, which means that there really isn't a facility within the psychiatric units that's dealing with this. And maybe there is, but it seems to me that's the second issue. The third issue is, then where are people sent? And it depends on how we've classified them, right? So it's not clear what the third part. And what are the available facilities for individuals with a psychiatric diagnosis, in which I assume they refuse a hospitalization, which is their right. And then where are they sent? So we don't want to get to homeless shelters. That's not, it seems to me that, yes, that's maybe part of the issue, but it seems to me the larger issue is, what are the resources for housing people who are given a psychiatric diagnosis? What happens to them in the hospital? Because as my understanding, again, is it's a very short stay. It's 72 hours. Nothing's going to happen in 72 hours except they're out. So why is it a short stay? What happens at that point to these people who were taken in? And then I'm going backwards, but how are they, who's doing this diagnosis that then determines their pathway? So it's the pathway. How are they, how is this categorization happening? What happens in the hospital that they seem to be out in a very short period of time? And then third is, how are their disposition? Where are they going? Determine, and what's available. So otherwise, so that's what I would understand is the three issues that, if we want to deal with this, I would break it down into that. And of course, then it gets very complicated once you're in a hospital in terms of, as people have been raising the rights, so you have civil liberties there, you have the right to refuse. You can only be kept there under certain situations. So that would be, anyhow, that's my attempt to get some frame around it.
Definitely, this is a complicated issue. So,
blame this guy.
Barak, how do you envision that we can do something
Well, that's what
when it
I
comes
wanted
to
us
the
to,
health aspect? Because
I wanted us to minimum have a discussion about it, and we may not be able to come up with a solution, but I liked your question, like, your initial question was, what can community board do? And I think the first thing to do is to get the data from people who are actually living this experience and not, firsthand. Now, I think that's the first. And just one thing about refusing things in the hospital, if you're deemed incompetent, you no longer have the right to control your own healthcare. Once you're deemed incompetent, you can't refuse certain.
Via the court.
Not necessarily.
Well, that's a legal decision.
A psychiatrist.
My wife had to do this, go to court regularly to get people to stay in the hospital and for the particular kind of treatments that they had. The 72 hours is for stabilization, and then they're free.
The psychiatrist will come and analyze them and deem them incompetent.
And it's likely the judge will say, okay, this experienced psychiatrist said they're incompetent, who am I to say they aren't, you know what I mean? So I think that right to refuse is a very complicated one in and of itself.
Mhm.
But I think the bottom line is, I think we need somebody with direct hand experience in, if anything has worked on any level, and if anything has worked, and that's something we could maybe support. This way.
I would like to ask any of the member who wanna take the lead on this issue.
I can try.
But we can invite somebody that Marty suggested.
Yeah, Marty, Jerry, and I think Raj too.
I'll reach out to Marty and Jerry I'll nominate you guys to have.
Yeah, no,
We have,
it's just a matter of making a phone call, like one of the agencies, Care for the Homeless is near us. Coalition for the Homeless are down on Fulton Street, this is what they do every day.
well, a couple things. Shall we have a joint meeting, suggest for May that we have a joint meeting with housing and pool some ideas and be able to access their experience? And then the other thing is, there is the press release, if you will, from the mayor's office, which was included, for a reading from November 29th. And I almost look at that as a cheat sheet. They allege or indicate there's a section, progress supporting New Yorkers, and it breaks down stuff that I'd like to see confirmed or denied. The bringing psychiatric beds, like what exactly is the relationship between first responders, meaning NYPD and H&H, the training. It even says implementing data collection processes. Well, what's happened? So I almost think of this article is like a great checklist for us to ask questions about.
We could have a forum and invite a few people, invite somebody from the 13th or the 17th precinct.
Yeah,
They have liaison people who love to come to meetings, and that's what their job is. And once told what the issue is, they would look things up on their end. How if somebody from Health and Hospitals would be great to have, somebody from Coalition or one of the agencies.
So
Could have a big forum. We used to have really good forums and really, that's.
so if we think about forum, we can schedule it in May, because April is already next month, so we're not gonna have enough time.
I love that idea. I think that's a
Okay,
great
so May.
idea.
And I would think you want to get public safety involved also, from the comment of this is also being implemented as as a public safety on the streets and so on. And I think that's partly what this is being directed at, the mayor's work. So I would want to include them in that.
Okay, good.
Well, I don't know if folks have relationships, but on the council, the Committee on Mental Health, we've got 8 people that serve on that might be invited by us to present the city council's perspective on this.
All right, so if we schedule it in May, let's see the schedule.
I'm also curious to see how the influx of
gonna
migrants
be
intersects with all of this.
So May 9 would be the date. So we can have,
We need a big room.
that's.
I mean, it sounds like a full board
That's
meeting.
Which will be no easy task.
Remember, that was our problem, that's what. Probably we can we get the water side? For that?
Might not be big.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Jesus has spent literal hours over the months trying to get
a
a
room.
board and for other things, so, I would not.
Unless we get the hunter, but that's also so big.
Yeah, maybe Baruch would be interested in something like this.
Yeah.
They have a very nice room on 24th Street. We used to meet there.
We have to pay
Yeah, that's,
Oh, really?
for Baruch, we have to pay.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, we pay.
Yep.
how did we, sorry, how did we get the Brookdale location for a full board?
Once again, that was something that just worked out, so,
Yeah.
He can work his magic twice, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, we can get, all right, so we'll find out if we can get, but the date would be May 9. Okay, all right, so let's move on to the next one. The discussion on the public health impacts of unlicensed cannabis shops. For this one, I also would like to ask volunteer who can take the lead on this, because we might develop another wrestle focusing on the health impacts of cannabis.
LV, because you and I have discussed this, I want to see if there's anybody else, but as you know, I'm on top of this issue and I would be happy to take some sort of a lead if you'd like that.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yes. So if we have the Russell ready in April, we can present it into the May full board, because we're not gonna have I don't wanna hold
Well,
a
the April
meeting.
meeting is, April full board is the 3rd, so, it's
Yeah,
before this meeting.
I think,
May-
if I may, I think if you're suggesting that a resolution be drafted, which I'm happy to do, I think it needs to be discussed in this committee before it goes to.
Could you also, somebody just fill me in on what you're interested in the public health aspect of this? So I know where you're headed on it? What's the concern in the public health, as a public health issue?
It's about the health impacts as stated in the agenda, the health impacts of cannabis, illegal
Right,
cannabis.
but I don't understand the health impact of illegal. What would be the difference between illegal cannabis or illegal cannabis if you're talking
Illegal.
about health? So
Well,
just
illegal
so I don't know what
cannabis-
we're talking about.
Illegal cannabis, of course, is not regulated. So
Right.
if you, according to one state assembly member, there
Yeah.
is no evidence that they sold crack. This is Lower East Side over the table of an illegal shop. So clearly we're getting into a whole different level when you get into unregulated. And some of the, I think, Elvie, correct me if I'm wrong, if this
Yep.
is the direction you were thinking, or you were thinking about cannabis as a whole.
Yeah, you remember what Anton explained to us in the last meeting? The legal shops, they sell the pure cannabis, how would I say, it? Pure cannabis, products. The illegal shops, they sell cannabis that are mixed with other chemicals.
They
That-
can be. They can be. I think it's fair to say that certainly there are illegal shops that are selling good product, but of course they're still unregulated, and who knows what they may do down the road, even if it's their
Yes.
product is good. All right, I just want to make sure that we're not making a blanket statement about all illegal cannabis shops' product. Yes, they should be shut down, I think, but it doesn't mean that they're selling worse product. Some will tell you they're selling better product.
Yeah. It's
Also
not,
then,
sure, it's just that some of them are mixed with other chemicals.
can
So
you
it's
just
really
then
what can
elaborate a
happen.
little?
Okay, sorry.
What?
I
No, I
was
just wanted to know, what's the oversight over these legal shops? In contrast, who's in there checking their products?
Well, they're
Barak,
they're very heavily regulated. There's multiple regulatory agencies at the farm level and in the shop
Yeah.
level. Whereas the illegal ones, pretty common to have bacterial contaminations that are unchecked. So it is a legitimate health issue.
But there are, and I will just, a small correction that there is mold and other issues in the legal product. A lot of this is because the farmers have had this piling up for months without too many shops open, so it's been sitting around. New York Cannabis Insider Brad Racino wrote a really long investigative story on this. It's really well researched. And even the labs they use they said that labs are just signing off on some of this product as if it's legit without really looking at the product. So, there's really issues on both sides. Now, of course, there's more concern on the legals, especially when you start talking about crack being sold over countertops and fentanyl potentially laced as well.
So I'm gonna put my hand up. I don't know.
Jerry?
Thank you. I would advocate for us to really sift between data once again and moral panic, because we've seen that time and again between the ridiculous distortions about fentanyl. There is actually a problem, but there is like so much obscuring the problem from you can die from touching it and so forth. So I think that's a liability in even assessing this space.
Well, I agree, and I think that's one of the real reasons I don't think this should be rushed. I think we need to have I'd be happy to draft something what I think we're going. We should pick it apart. We should possibly even tear it up. But I think if this group agrees that it's the right direction to at least explore it, I kind of with you, Jerry. I don't want to panic about something that's a small percentage.
So
but
in a coincidence, last night I followed up with Sandy. I had suggested bringing the two founders of Cannabis Wire and been covering the space for 6 or 7 years now and do both local New York reporting, national, and some global. And they could actually give a 5-minute presentation, and then I think they could successfully take any question.
Will they be agreeing to take down their paywall?
I mean, I'm happy to reach out, and I don't know whether or not that's a couple months down the line, but I think the issue, I don't want to say that we're right to worry about anything that has to do with controlled substances where there's no oversight could be a possible problem. They're bad faith actors, and where they have no oversight, things will occur.
Right.
With
any industry that is,
I'll raise my hand.
Hold on.
Huh?
Jerry, can you invite somebody for next month?
I don't know if because I can try. I can immediately tomorrow and see whether or not this is enough lead time. And I'll let you know. Yeah, because I can reach out to them.
So,
right.
I was going to, sorry, I'm not raising my hand, sorry.
Sandra.
Yeah, I was just, I think also in the concern of what these illegal shops are doing, of which I am a major opponent of, the issue of what the legal shops are foisting on people and what the problems are, there are also concerns, right? I mean, so the more you demonize one and ignore the other, there's a real imbalance. And so my thought was, and actually cigarettes are legal and they're killers, right? So it's just an interesting direction of this demonization of one aspect of this issue, right? And then everything else is okay. And I think we should look at that assumption as well in doing this. And I'd be happy to get rid of all the illegal ones, but that leaves legalization as if it's okay, Okay.
Yes, it's sort of going to that. We are now seeing studies really for the first time, because of course now there's mass amounts of individuals who are okay with taking part in studies since it's legal in many states. So we're starting to get back these studies now. I know, LV, you're familiar with the one that was in the New York Times, a study that was done about increase in the risk of heart attacks. But again, and they're saying that, we could be in a situation where we are with tobacco, that we should be pushing against it, because there's now showing, in addition to the heart attacks, anything you suck into your lungs is potentially not good. So what I'm saying is, and I'm not trying to demonize that, I'm just saying studies are going to start bubbling up. People are going to be reacting to them. There's going to be a little bit of panic on some sides. There's a big future ahead of us where we haven't seen the studies, right? I mean, we're like at the advent, like tobacco was. I'm not saying it's going to be proven to be the same, but I think we need to take a pause here and not rush into any declarative statement at this point. And I said I'll draft it just to sort of get us humming, but it's a long discussion, I think. If that makes sense.
Okay. All right, so just to summarize, Barack is gonna take the lead on the first agenda, and Kevin is gonna take the lead on the second. And, so we only have 2 more months to meet, because I don't wanna meet from June, July, and August. We're gonna be in hiatus. So if we can invite somebody to come, Jerry, if you can invite somebody to come next month, and we'll plan about the form for May.
Can I, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I raised my hand. I would like to, now that we've thought about it a little bit more, especially if Jerry's going to bring in Cannabis Wire, please take down the paywall. Then we can definitely I think we should pause before we draft anything. I don't see where there's a rush. We could even do it in the fall, right? We don't have to rush this out now. Again, the studies are still coming in. I would feel better if we waited until some outside speaker comes in.
Sorry, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who doesn't know what Cannabis Wire is. Is this like an industry?
Not at all. It's an independent
Yeah, I don't know what the-
application founded by 2 former grad students at Columbia. Well-regarded, a source for a lot of people who cover the space. They've done really good work.
And this is no involvement in it, but I think also New York Cannabis Wire, the gentleman, Brad Racino, I really respect him. I've done a lot of research on this. He always comes through. So since we're giving out shout outs, Brad Racino.
Oh, good. Okay, so I don't have any report, any old or new business?
It was a really good conversation. Both of them, both the items, yeah.
No old or
I
new
have some new
business?
business. It's kind of off, but Miriam's here. On Monday, food scrap composters are coming back to St. Farton Park. It's been restored. Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, the thing is, we don't know how long it's going to stay because it's just funding enough to get us through a little bit, but we hope it can stay for a while.
Good news.
Great.
Until city funding dries up, but yeah. I knew Miriam, that was a one for Miriam.
That's big.
Any other? Okay, if there's no other business.